a lot has happened in my life, like the last 2 years especially. Do you know I got canceled?
And nevertheless, here we are. Again, hey everyone, welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of David Dobrik, yet again in another video that has just recently been released. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. So for those of you who do not know this specific situation, one, there have been multiple videos on David Dobrik in the past, so we're relying on some of the information from those, but then along with that, a little crash course. Him and another person that was part of the team that they were on called the Vlog Squad did a stunt with heavy equipment and a rope swing, and it went extremely wrong, and David's friend at the time, Jeff, got severely hurt. And some things have really come around in regards to that and some other incidents that were covered earlier. And now David's addressing this as well. And it has sparked some thoughts. So I went through the entire interview and found the areas that are more applicable to what we're looking at. Some things that I do want to note before we dive into the video is that the setting itself is the classic podcast setting that he has on his podcast channel. So there's nothing that can be read into on that. Nothing to see there. Along with that, though, I do want to note that he's wearing this enormously brimmed hat. It looks like he might be trying to hide behind it on some level, especially with the angling of things, and that may be intentional. It does obscure his eyes, but I don't want to read too much into that either. It does make it a little bit more difficult because of it, but it could just be an honest mistake wardrobe-wise. Another thing that I will note is that's harder to see is that they did actually edit this up in a couple different areas. I was able to pick up some hidden cuts to where you can hear the audio change in the background while the video doesn't actually show a cut. Very cleverly edited, so I did have some questions as to what would and wouldn't be left in there, but I think this is all enough of the precursor stuff. Let's go ahead and start into the actual video itself, and we'll work through it.
Just like the movies that you can put on and you can watch with like a blank mind and you can just be like dumb happy.
Yeah.
Like that's what I've always enjoyed. And that's what I've always wanted to put out. Like I've always wanted to put out content where it's like, I'm not talking about the stuff that's like bothering me. And I'm not talking about stuff that's like making me sad that day. Cause I don't know, not that I was like embarrassed, but I just feel like that's not my place. Like it's not, I'm making these videos and I don't mean this in a way to like gas myself up, but like I'm making these videos to make other people laugh and to make other people smile. Like, why should they worry about how I'm feeling? And like, and that's 100% true. Like I've always thought.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pause here and make some notes about this because this is helping us add context. This entire video really does help us understand a little bit more about how David functions in day-to-day processing. But non-verbally speaking, he stays in this rather small frame most of the time. He'll do some sitting back and postural changes as you would expect to see in this sort of scenario. But along with that, he's trying to talk about how he makes content exclusively for the happiness of the viewer, which is most of the time not true. Most influencers, content creators, while they do enjoy bringing joy to the viewer, they're also there very much for the money. If they weren't, then it wouldn't be monetized. So he's more or less trying to play this in a less overt way. I only do this for the fans. That's the only reason, and that's 100% true. That reiteration, not really so, and also just basic logical processing lets us know that that really can't be the case. The reason that I'm leaving this in here is because he's already setting himself up to be ultra pure in this situation. And if there's anything that we've seen on the channel on repeat, it's that people that have presented themselves as ultra pure in a situation, especially when they're a person of interest, that usually means that there's something else going on. So it's just a red flag right now, but let's continue watching.
I don't know. I hate saying that because it does sound like I'm like, it's not about me, it's about the people watching. But like I in a way I mean that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of merit to that. And so when you
But that's why I hate saying it, because it does sound
well,
like
let me say it. There's a lot of merit to it. And when you showed me that way, and I was like, you know what? That is a good way to be, because the way I was doing it, one-man shows was not working for me.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here because there are areas that I did fast forward through, but another dynamic that I want to note here is the interpersonal one between David and the other gentleman. He's very supported here, David is. He's not being challenged in many ways. He's not being asked very many difficult questions, and throughout this entire process, he's offered every single escape out that he possibly can. This isn't an interview for answering for what he's done. It's not an apology. It really is just there for him to talk about how he feels about himself. And they say that regularly on here. And what strikes me as odd is how he tries to say that and then reverse around and try to treat this episode like it's addressing issues. And it's not. It's not addressing issues. It's really just David taking his opportunity to be like, I'm going to just kind of say what I want to say. And that's it. This is about me. And it's difficult to take in as a person involved in the situation, even on a third term basis. So I can only imagine how difficult it would be for the people immediately involved to hear him address it like this. Very fascinating. So we'll let these areas fast forward throughout and then continue on here.
I think that was like my fun, bubbly personality, like that side to me, which was very true and authentic.
Yes.
I feel like part of it was shot. So like
It was killed.
Yes.
Killed off.
Part of it was.
I mean, the people should know, the people that love you and support you.
Okay, so once again, we can hear David still painting himself to be a victim in this area. He's doing a similar thing that Alec did, where he's trying to pull in like, hey, there was definitely a victim due to my ineptitude, but I'm also kind of a victim here because I'm like really sad. Somebody almost died for sure. It was my fault for sure. I'll admit to all of that, but I was really sad. For sure. So this is another area where it seems as though this podcast was centered around trying to build David's victimhood rather than him answer for any of his actions whatsoever. Let's see how this plays out and why this is actually very frustrating just due to how he placed this on the internet. So let's go.
But all we're trying to accomplish is just so you feel better. And honestly, maybe this podcast won't even go up.
Yeah, I think the big problem is a lot has happened in my life, like the last 2 years especially. Do you know I got canceled?
Yeah, I did too. And you know what the real crime is, David?
Right.
I don't think that canceled means much of anything. Here we are with another cancellation that's not really a cancellation, but a pause. And now we're going to hear what the true crime of this whole scenario is.
The real crime is that when you do talk, you're incredible. And then when you do tell people how you're feeling and stuff, you're incredible. You're an incredible communicator. And
I like to think I am.
You are. And you're doing yourself a disservice by just not
being confident in your
being confident and speaking from the heart.
Yeah.
Because you're like the best at it out of all of us.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
So during this time, you can hear the dynamic even more so amplified. So David's not being challenged right now on any level, so it's not reflecting in his nonverbal communication. Nothing's happening, but we do see that the people in the room are really just there to sugarcoat everything, to pet his ego, and to make him feel like he's one of the best people in the world, despite the things that he's more or less trying to address in this video, which, if I remember correctly, is called Addressing Everything or something along those lines. So it's just a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I've been going, the last 2 years of my life have been like the worst years of my life. And yeah, it's been like really, really bad. Like I didn't even know like I could feel something like this. It's pretty dark, and it's pretty unfortunate, but I'm figuring it out.
Well,
so this is letting us know another aspect of David's psychology on this, just with his verbals. He's talking about how difficult it has been for him, and he'll throw in some extra intense details to try to let us know it's been really, really bad for me, guys. And then he'll immediately try to do this thing where he comes out as a hero and where he's like, but it's no big deal, so it's fine. And it's this subtle manipulation that makes you feel like he's trying to be a Christ character towards you. And it's an unfortunate manipulation, and many people will do this even unintentionally as they feel like they haven't gotten the attention that they personally feel they deserve. So in this, we could probably assume that David doesn't feel like he's gotten the support or the attention he feels he deserves during this time, because after all, it's been so very hard for him despite the destruction that he's been causing around. It's very true that this could be very difficult for David, but this is called the consequences of your actions. It's understandable that he's feeling this pressure, but that doesn't mean that he needs to be pitied or coddled right now. So let's continue.
Well, there's a lot of issues on the table, and probably the first thing is Jeff. We should talk about that and what's going on and how you feel about it.
Right. recently our friend Jeff Wittick, posted some stuff about me, just about the accident and about how things have been handled. And
you didn't call him on his surgery, stuff like that.
And I think there's things that I haven't really spoken about.
Okay. So now this is the one area where he's almost challenged for a second by people bringing up Jeff. And we could see that he is having some difficulty. There's a manipulator coming up here where it's a self-soothing gesture with his hair. He's also having some vocal difficulty as well. So this is letting us know that he does have some emotional engagement here. Now, what that is, it's far too early to tell. But we can tell that there is emotional engagement coming in. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. We're going to be looking at his tone to see how that inflects and so on and so forth. And then we're also going to be looking at his nonverbal communication, seeing if there's a spike, be it positive or negative, to hopefully let us know some things. Let's continue.
I've never spoken about the surgery or the incident in general. So I think it's kind of time for that. The Jeff thing, the Jeff thing is the fucking worst because before I even say anything, like that day is like the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I wish I would fucking do anything to take that day back.
So we get what David's saying here, worst day, sure. But what is interesting is still the psychology behind of what he's saying. There was a terrible thing that happened to my friend at the time that I was responsible for, and it was the worst thing for me. It was the worst thing for me. He almost died, but it was really terrible for me. And while, yes, once again, we understand terrible for you, David, more terrible for the people affected by your bad actions. That's where the internet's upset. If the people that have been affected are still feeling the effects of it, then maybe it's not quite yet time to try to rust by and move on forward. But let's continue gathering more data.
My hand is shaking. I mean, anything. Like, I'm being dead ass. Like, I wish it was me up there. I wish whatever. Like, it's the most unfortunate thing ever. And I think, and it's an accident. That's what it was. It's an accident. Like, I also want to make that clear. I don't know if people think that there's never a world where I would ever want that to happen to a person. I was never up there, like, driving the thing, wanting to hurt him or whatever it was. Like, that was never the thing.
Okay, so during this area, this never want to do it, he's really hammering this home. And so at this point, it's just a spike in his nonverbal and verbal and just his baseline, more or less. So we do know that there's a lot of pressure behind this, and that does make sense contextually. We're going to have to keep our eye out for any other areas where we could see, oh, maybe that was him more or less lying, or perhaps maybe it was just the nerves of the situation. I do, for one, right now believe that it is the nerves of the situation. I don't think that David was intending to go out and cause a substantial amount of damage, but I do believe that he was aware of the risks and chose to make a calculated decision due to some of the verbal things that he says and the nonverbal that kind of amplifies that later on. So let's continue.
Like, really cool visuals of, like, people doing the coolest things. And one of them was people were, like, wakeboarding, I don't know what that's called, while holding on to an excavator. And that was, like, one of, like, 5 things we were going to do. That was, like, the first activity that we had planned to shoot. And yeah, the morning came where we were in Utah. We were filming it. And
he's having so much difficulty here. You can hear the gut reaction that he's having, and here he's beginning to burp more and swallow more because his gut is lighting up. He's becoming more nervous. This is a psychophysiological response that you really can't control too well. Another place that we saw this come out would be in the Jinx documentary that we did, and how Robert Durst at the end of that specific series showed a lot of gastrointestinal discomfort due to the nerves of the situation. So we're seeing that come up with him, and now we're getting to the morning of, and he has sat back, did an enormous sigh, and he's kind of holding the microphone in front of him, and this is different from what was earlier. So my question is, why? What's the difference of the morning of? You were telling a story, it seemed to be pretty synchronized. You had all of your illustrators correct. Everything was quite synchronized, although you were having some obvious nervous difficulty, and now you're sitting back sighing and having this difficulty on the morning of. Maybe there's some questions here, so let's continue.
And yeah, we were getting the shots, wakeboarding, and then I remember Jeff came up to one of my buddies, one of our friends. I don't know why I say it like that. And then later to me, and he was like, this is fucking boring as shit. What are we, like, preschoolers? Like, let's do something cool. And he said he wanted to swing from it. And I loved the idea. I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. So
Something was difficult there. I love the idea. Hell yeah, let's do it. Big gulp. He's gently shaking his head no during that. Now that could be an intentional. It's so small that it is a red flag to me. It is a slight one. It doesn't make sense contextually. It could be desynchronization. He's shaking his head no. Well, hell yeah, I love the idea. So something in there could be desynchronized. Either one, he doesn't like it, or two, maybe it wasn't Jeff's idea. Along with that, he's having some insincerity come in with the shoulder shrug and the hunching in there. These are defensive and insecure gestures. So he's really not portraying much confidence the morning of during that, and then that's also amplified by the psychophysiological stuff with the burping and the swallowing that's much more difficult to maintain. So this is a red flag, absolutely. We want to pay attention to this. Definitely have questions in this area. Maybe this conversation didn't go exactly how he's saying it did.
I remember too, like,
Susie texted me and said, you guys were at Utah Valley Hospital, and
oh shit, I didn't know you weren't there.
yeah, Jason wasn't even
I
there.
wasn't even there, and that eats me up. That eats me up that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done if, because I feel like, me and Matt King are always the ones that are like, hang on, let's wait.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
That caused agitation to David. And we can think of why. So this is a really telling part to me. One, we see that there is more responsibility being felt by the people around David, surrounding David, than from David himself, the one who organized the situation. David's noticing that dynamic is being called forward here, that he is now being portrayed as maybe the less responsible person here, because he is. And he's taking some issues with it, and you saw that come up by some postural changes. He's really wanting to say something in response to that, but he's not able to in a way that makes him sound good at all. So he's just gonna sit silently, and then he's gonna be offered a way out of that very awkward situation that he was just placed in. Let's continue.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So,
Well, sorry.
yeah.
And I remember, like,
It was a comeback video. There was a lot of pressure on that.
I mean, I think pressure on Matt.
On that.
Oh, I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to be said with just that as well. Like, I think that's why I don't want to make the kinds of videos I was making before. Was there was this like pressure to perform. So there was like, and not. I don't know. I'm like 50-50 on it, because it's like.
So we're about to get to a very revealing psychology behind David and how he actually feels about the situation, because he's still 50-50 on this situation. So he's about to go in and say, I have to perform, so I have to up it, and that can be dangerous because it can lead to really stupid scenarios. But he's seeing that this is going to be difficult for him, so now he's going to try to play off his logic of it. And we'll address that in a second. These are just interesting things that are building up here.
On one side, like, that's how things are made that are great. Like, everybody wants to contribute. Everybody wants to make it bigger. Everybody wants to make it better. Like, that's how great things are made. Is like, people have a motive and people have a desire to make something amazing.
Okay, so that's how great things are made. This is the way it is. This is his reality that he perceives. If you want to make great things, you have to up it each time. Which, fair, that's very true. If you want to be able to continue to make great things, you have to try to improve. Improvement is necessary. So that is technically true, but that doesn't mean that you have to be stupid while doing it, and that's what he's trying to enable. It's like, no, I was pursuing greatness, which enables my stupidity. That's not okay. Greatness isn't achieved by being dumb. Greatness is achieved by sacrificing, by failing, and by improving. That's the issue here. So, but it's his reality that he's perceiving. That R is very important. That right now, that's how things are. Now, let's hear about an alternate thought process.
But on the other side, I could see how like that environment can get dangerous.
So very brief time on it. On the opposite side of that, let's breeze right by this. It could get dangerous. Right by. So moving on. And that's interesting. One, time spent very short. Almost none at all. Could get dangerous. Barely a thought. Along with that, the could is the thing That is an alternate reality. That's not his perception of it. It's not the way things are, like his previous statement. It's the way the things could be in an alternate something or another else, which means that even on a small psychological level, David's still looking at this situation as really, though, great things are going to happen, and only sometimes maybe some bad things could happen, and I'm willing to make those chances because great things could happen. That's why he's torn. Fascinating. Fascinating that David's willing to sacrifice others for his greatness.
So when we got to the hospital, Jeff was in pretty good spirits. It's a really hard thing to like navigate when you're in the hospital with something like that, because you don't know whether or not to be like super serious and caring or goofy, right? Like I don't know how to do that. And I remember
this is interesting. I don't know how to do that. He's talking about how to go into a hospital. We weren't asked this question, like what was your approach to it? So he brings it up intentionally. It's important to him. And then he says, I don't know whether to be goofy or serious. And then he does a huge postural change. He does a mouth-blocking gesture, perhaps. At very least, it's just a manipulator on his face. It is agitation, activity, and his nonverbal communication. And so my question is, why would you bring that up? Why would you bring up the word goofy? And then why would you show this odd spike in your nonverbal communication, all unprompted? My feeling is that perhaps David went into the situation much more lighthearted than he should have. He wanted to treat it like it was lighthearted, perhaps a joke, and it maybe wasn't, or he was aware that maybe he shouldn't have. That does seem to be the case here. There's not enough evidence to say that for sure, but it is a red flag.
I remember Jeff told me to check my DMs, and it was a video that he found like 15 minutes before the accident that somebody posted, and he said, let's recreate this, and it was a guy swinging from an excavator and flying off. I didn't see that DM till the hospital, and he jokes. He's like, I didn't mean literally, haha, like he joked. That was the first time I saw the DM. That was the first time I opened it.
That's important to know. First time he saw it was in the hospital. The question is, who cares? His reason for this is to try to more or less try to shift blame over to Jeff of it being Jeff's idea, even though right here, he just admitted that it could not have been Jeff's idea to do it this way. Fascinating thing that he's trying to do this blame shifting thing while counteracting himself in the very same statement. It's odd. It's odd patterning. Let's continue.
And then he asked, he's like, can you promise me one thing? And I said, what? And he's like, can you just promise that no one ever knows that this was my idea? And I was like, absolutely. Like, that's not a big deal. And then that's the promise I broke recently.
That entire time, David would not look at anyone. He wouldn't look at the people in there. He wouldn't look at the camera. He's looking steadily off and to the side while trying to say that at Jeff's worst part here on the table that he didn't want people to know that this was his idea. It doesn't make logical sense whatsoever considering the circumstances, but it's also odd non-verbally that David refuses to look anybody in the eye while kind of saying this. Along with that, his tone drops very, very soft. His pitch is lower as well, and he is speaking rather spacedly. So this is a difference in his nonverbal communication with the auditory side of things. And this is a red flag all the way around, and it doesn't make logical contextual sense. So we just have to be aware of that. Let's continue.
We were following his lead. So when he wanted to make a doc, like I was there. Like I was like, whatever you need me to do, like however I'm going to be in this, like I'll be in it. And I think the doc is where things started to get a little strange, because I remember we were in Utah. We went to like 3 or 4 surgeries with him. I'm not sure, back to Utah. And one of them, we were filming the doc, and one of his guys that works with him went up to Taylor and was like, we really want to make David cry in this piece. We really want him to know what he's done. And there was more of what he said to Taylor, but that was kind of the thing that resonated with me the most.
So watching David's eyes in this area to see when he's looking away and processing what could be in the moment as opposed to what he's checking to see what a person's response is, it's really telling to see when a person does and doesn't look up to see. And during this time, while he's talking about various areas that could sound difficult, he's looking away. But as soon as it might be seen as something that could be, maybe you can have some pity towards me, he does flash up to check to see what the person's reaction is. So he is still kind of gauging the situation in this. Whether or not he's doing this consciously, I am not totally positive. But he does want to see if him stating that people wanted to see him cry is getting the sympathy that he hopes people will give him. Fascinating. It doesn't happen.
That's where I started to feel like, oh, fuck, like, what's going on here? Like, someone's not being transparent with me here. Like, I almost feel like I'm being pushed into a corner. And that made me feel really, like, uncomfortable and scared. And
Wait, why? What's wrong with what is wrong with you crying in the doc?
well, because it's just like a weird thing to say. I felt like it was like, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but like that to me felt like, I don't know, like it just felt weird.
I think David is suffering some of his own medicine right now. So often, content creators, influencers who do things like what David does is put people in horribly awkward positions and make them go along with it by sheer pressure of exposure of the person themselves and of the situation itself of being put on film and being part of a documentary or whatever they were working on here. So he's feeling some of this pressure where they're like, no, we want to have him cry. We want people to know and see that he knows and sees what he's done. And David's like, oh, I don't want to do that. That feels manipulative. It could be low-key manipulative, as he is manipulative with his content as well. And then she brings up an excellent point. What's wrong with you showing emotion on it? And he's like, oh, well, and what he's trying to say is the way that they want me to show the emotion. And so he's not actually objecting to the emotion itself, but what I do find fascinating to me is that he wants to be able to control everything himself. It's still the sense of control. Maybe he would be willing to show emotion, but it's on his terms. And he doesn't want to maybe work with what another person needs. He wants to work with what specifically he needs, which would be fine, except for the fact that he's also the one who has caused the problem in said scenario. So this is where this gets to be an interesting and rather muddy dynamic. He's still in the wrong, while some of the actions that he's doing in different circumstances would have been okay.
Yeah. And also I think you know, the doc came after a bunch of other bad shit that happened.
Right. And I think came at the wrong time. And
he's still having so much difficulty. You can hear so much difficulty centered around this doc as well. Anytime that there's something of importance entering into the situation, we hear David just lose his gastrointestinal grasp on reality. So he's really having difficulty in here, a lot of burping, gasping. He also might be trying to fight back tears, which would be absolutely horrifically ironic if he's trying to fight back tears here while talking about how he felt weird giving tears in another situation for somebody else because they wanted him to. So if it's for him, it's A-okay. If he's in control, it's A-okay. If it's not for somebody else, it's A-okay. If it's anything else other than that, then we have some issues. So we're really getting to understand what David's psychology is here, even just by his verbal processing. And that is, once again, very hammered home by the nonverbal communication around that as well. Synchronization really does help add clarity to the message. Let's continue.
And back to the secret that he wanted me to keep. I was all hands on deck for that, but I feel like I can take, 80% of the responsibility, 90%, 100% of the responsibility for the accident, whatever he needs me to do.
There's an important thing to note about David's psychology. David doesn't really feel a specific amount of responsibility in the incident. He's willing to have whatever Jeff feels like he wants him to have, which just lets us know. David isn't sitting there being like, no, I am responsible for this deal. He's like, no, I will play whatever role of responsibility I have to play because I'm not thinking of it in that way. And that, I hope he's trying to present that as like I'm willing to be whatever anybody needs me to be sacrificially. That's probably what he's even gunning for. But one, he has not been doing that. And two, he's also kind of going against his own words here as well, where he's saying, yeah, this is my complete responsibility, but I don't want to take the responsibility. I'm upset that I have to have it.
But that, then when it gets to the point where it started to feel like I was taking 150% of the responsibility, right. I started to see things like David fucking forced his friend up there, like all this kind of stuff, like that was just fucking insane. And it felt like people thought I literally sent him up there just so he can fucking swing off this thing.
Right.
Like that was not the case. And like the more and more that happened, the more I was like, what is going on? Like this is not what happened. It was a combined decision we made, and it was a complete accident. And I'm so fucking sorry that accident happened, but it did, and there's no going back from that.
So now we're going to pause and think about the psychology of what David is saying in his aggression here. Non-verbally, he's aggressive and synchronized with it. He's feeling heated here because he's feeling passionate here because he feels justified here. So everything is flowing synchronized and aggressively as he's kind of portraying his side about him feeling like he's having to take more of a responsibility than he should. And then at the end, he also tries to shift some blame around as well, again, towards Jeff, towards other people in the situation. It's super bad. And then at the end of that, he tries to also be, but it happened, so we gotta move by it. So we've seen a number of complexities come out here with just this little tiny phrasing area where we kind of are really understanding more and more and more how David perceives the actual situation rather than the words that he's trying to say. More so the thoughts behind those words and the context that it really has is a lot more enlightening. So I think David intended on this being clarifying for people, and in a way it really is being clarifying for people, but not in the way that he's really hoping. Let's continue.
Like there's nothing we can do. And yeah, I wish it was more like that. And then when it started to be like more 150% on me, I started to get, I don't know, I guess like it's just freaked me out more. I was just like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
So this is also an interesting point. He's having difficulty here as well. So he's suddenly, I don't knowing so much. He's not sure. He doesn't know how this is supposed to clean up because he's realizing that there might be some faults in what he's saying, which, fair. I think people might be able to look at this and get some information from it and hopefully not take it wrong either. So he's saying that everything was okay up to a certain point, and then once it hit the 150%-ish part, then it was too much and I was upset, and I don't know. Which would make sense contextually, especially if he wants to get on by it like he's kind of indicated multiple different times here, even subconsciously, that maybe it is a time thing. Maybe he was wanting to take 100% of the responsibility, or what he perceived as 100% of the responsibility up to a certain time, and then he hoped that people would drop it or move on by or let him skate by. And then anything after that is suddenly 150%. That's kind of what the feeling that we get is that this is a time thing and not a responsibility thing. But then this 150% side of things, there are definitely aspects where I'm sure he's receiving a lot of heat from people being like, oh, you're a terrible person, you intentionally did these things. And while he might have some lapse in judgment, and he's also arguably not the best of people, as we've seen in the past as well, I do not believe that his intent here was to go and kill Jeff. I don't think that was his intent whatsoever, but I do believe that he was intending on making a very sensational video and was willing to take the risks, especially since he himself wasn't at risk. Fascinating. Let's continue.
And then in terms of his like medical payments, so far we've paid, I think I just had accounting check and it was like $78,000 of surgery. And I don't know what that equates to. I don't know what that is, but I don't love the fact that he's going around saying I don't pay for surgeries. Like that fucking hurts. And the reason we haven't been paying for a surgery, I don't know if it's,
I had to do that. I only took out like a one phrase in between because he tried to separate it. He insists we've been paying all of it. Seconds later, we get to this line where he's like, and then the times that we haven't been paying the surgeries, and it's like, wait, so have you been paying all of it, or are there times that you haven't been paying the surgeries? Which time did you lie in that, David? Which one are you doing? So he has lied, absolutely. And now there's two people that say he hasn't been paying it, himself and another person, and only one that's saying he is, which is himself. So 2 against 1, mathematically, he's likely not holding up his end of the bargain financially, but that's just a basic math kind of centered around this scenario. Let's continue watching.
assistant's fault or Jeff just told him to back off from us, but like I don't handle that stuff more. I just give approval to spend that, whatever.
Right.
But like Natalie has asked multiple times, like loop us into all these surgeries, and we're just not getting looped into anything. Mm-hmm. And then we're blindsided when he goes to another surgery, and then he'll like come out and be like his most recent surgery, I didn't know that he had a surgery until he unfollowed me on Instagram. And that's because, you know, it's a two-way street. We can be like, when's your next surgery? But also we're not no one's looping us into what we need to be paying for. And to this day, like,
this is such a revealing thing of David's dynamic as well. David sees money as his fix for things. He's about to even say, to this day, I'm willing to pay for all the stuff. But what he's not willing to do is give effort, give time, give energy, or attention to the people. He wants to slap his money badge on it and be like, no, I said I would pay, but I don't want to have to find out when the surgeries are. I don't want to have to find out how you're doing in the recoveries of the surgeries. I don't want to have to find out anything to do with the schedules. Heck, I can't even handle that stuff. Even though you were my friend, apparently, I can't be bothered by those menial inconveniences of your life. So since you didn't search after me, the person who hurt you and caused you pain and caused you all this damage, since you haven't been chasing me, then I feel like you aren't suffering enough, or it's your fault in some way. You just didn't reach out to us enough. And that's such a terrible manipulative thing to say to somebody. I hurt you and you didn't chase me enough to like get me to help you more, so it's your fault. Wow. Oof, that's rough. That's rough.
I'm still keeping my word. Like, I want him to send me whatever he needs me to pay for. Like, I will pay for it. But it's just not fair to say
that I have to do something for it.
That we haven't been paying for it because we
I've paid literally every single bill that has ever been said.
Yeah, every bill and well, as long as he needs it. Mm-hmm.
Big look away there, fall off in pitch and tone and confidence, sit back as long as he needs it, sits back. Maybe not. Maybe not as long as he needs it. There's going to be a complication there for sure. Just beware.
I don't know.
This is good. I honestly think he'll see this and, you know, really appreciate this.
You think?
I think he will because...
Why is this guy in the room? Even so, her initial response was to try to catch and prevent that. You could see that she's like, maybe not. Maybe he won't. You might be off on this one. This one might be a little bit of a shot in the dark here. And even David's like, are you positive on that? So maybe that's their dynamic. Maybe he's just there as kind of David's hype man in general. Let me know in the comments below. But in this scenario specifically, he's almost illogically supportive of David, even when what he's saying is ridiculous. It's interesting.
I do. He's hurt. He feels like he was swiped under the rug and just
like I can see from Jeff's perspective, like it's probably really tough when he sees my videos and I'm like traveling the world and I'm having this like fucking time of my life, and it's like,
and he's getting his eye cracked open.
Yeah, and it's like, and it totally looks, you know, I haven't mentioned this, like no one can even fucking tell that I want to fucking blow out.
Yeah,
and that's part of the reason I want to do this is like this weighs on me every fucking minute of every day of my life. Fuck, I'm so lame.
David's still doing some manipulations with bringing in some aspects of stuff, trying to add weight to his scenario, trying to garnish pity for himself as well. So he's trying to excuse his kind of rude behavior to Jeff, and that Jeff is in recovery, intensive recovery from something caused largely by David, and David is kind of really dropping the ball with that and doing all of these things. So now David's like, no, I'm really feeling bad about it. You just can't tell. And then he wants to throw in this very, very upsetting detail about things to shock you and to garnish some sympathy. And with that, he also follows in letting us know that he feels that sympathy for himself with a genuine falling apart of emotion, but it's still a manipulation in the situation itself. Because he immediately took what started out to be, I could see how this would be hard for Jeff to see, but please still pity me genuinely. It's still fascinating, even though it is hard to be able to hear somebody go through something difficult for me. I want to empathize with somebody suffering. I want to be able to look at this with more of a clean look at things, to see past what's being said and actually what's being accomplished with what's being said. So let's continue watching this.
But like, it's like the worst. Why are you crying? It's just,
I feel so bad.
No. It was your fault. You shouldn't have left for the bathroom. No, No.
I feel so bad for you, man.
This is even allowing David to try to show himself more as a white knight again by like, no, let's not focus on me anymore, even though he was the one who brought it into the situation. I understand Jeff's having a hard time here, but please pity me. Somebody pities him and he can be like, don't pity me. We see what you're doing, David, and also the people around you are enabling you to do it. This is what they chose to present. This was their choice. They wanted people to know that this is how they want to handle things publicly, is by showing that David doesn't have accountability.
I think later, if
I want to also note something here. We're a good bit through this video, and something that you can tell throughout this is David's general lack of somberness in areas that aren't related to him. As soon as it shifts around to somebody else, he's very easily in a laughing, joyous kind of mood, letting us know the tone of the situation outside of himself is more disconnected. He doesn't have emotional connection to it. It's not as important to him. But as soon as it has to do with something how he's feeling or how he could be perceived as a victim, then things hit real heavy real fast. He hasn't been choked up about Jeff's experience. He hasn't been choked up about anybody else's experience. He's been choked up about his experience, and that alone. We've been seeing this, right? A lot of you have pointed out, why is he laughing here? Why is he smiling here? Why is he portraying so weirdly here? Some areas it's nerves and it's difficult to be able to say specific things without feeling uncomfortable, and smiling is a nervous response. Could be that on some level. Along with that, though, as we're seeing from the context of the entire interview, we can rest assured that it's just not as important to David as his own feelings are. That's the more telling side of things. Let's continue watching.
for Jeff, it became more like he just didn't want to be involved with.
Right, but there's a way to say that other than like I'm silencing him.
Yeah.
I've never wanted to silence Jeff. I've never.
Yep, that's fair.
Well, hold on, that's not fair. Would I have loved for him to keep stuff to ourselves?
Yeah,
like our conversations and stuff. Yes, but like.
This is revealing. So David has some agitation with that response. Well, there's a different way that you could do it other than what. So that agitation, that increase both in pitch and force behind it and speed of the words delivered. That's agitation, that's anger. He's feeling like maybe a side that he doesn't want to be perceived as being put out there. And then he says this, I would never say, or I would never have him hold anything back. I don't want him to hold back any information. He quickly realizes that he has not told the truth there, and that people can catch him out on that very quickly. And then he has to back up, and he has a little self-soothing gesture in there, and he leans back again, and he's saying, well, obviously I wanted him to keep stuff between us. And so, yes, he literally said, I would never ask Jeff to withhold information, and then immediately turned around defensively and said, I mean, except for the times that I do.
But no, there was never a moment where I was like, no one can know about this injury. Like there was never a moment where he like walks into my office and like I hit a button and the door locks and I'm just like,
yeah,
we need to talk about some stuff. I put my feet on this.
So the absurdity is what he's trying to paint there. David's trying to paint this absurd kind of scenario, which he's doing so, I think, for trying to build a comedic sake, but the psychology behind it is still interesting. That he's really painting up this, like, he sees it as absurd that he would ask Jeff to withhold information, though he himself has just admitted that he has done so. So it's a fascinating part of this processing that he has, that David might not even be aware of how overtly twisted some of the things that he is presenting are. It might be something that he is himself blind to. Hopefully a video like this will help him see those to where you can address and become a better person for the people around you. But it is interesting to note.
I think at the end of the day, like, this has been such a shitty situation, like from the moment it happened to the last couple months. And like I said, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about this. And I'm so sorry that this happened to you, Jeff. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I wish it was easier. I wish it was easier to deal with this. I wish we were both better communicators. Because I know it eats you up and I know it eats me up and I know for a fact we don't communicate that to each other properly.
Some people have brought up eye contact. That is important here, and something that is also difficult to note is that it's a lens. It is different to make eye contact with a lens, so to speak, which a lot of content creators get that. But what's important to note as well is the general lack of eye contact in general in the room. He's not making eye contact with anyone. He has been before, he's interacting before, but in this area, he's not. Along with that, he also has a substantial drop off in his pitch, tone, and flow. He had a certain cadence, and now it's all shifted to the same tone, same pitch, and it's all down here. And it's rather broken up, and it's spoken very softly, and he's looking around and not looking up at anything except for maybe the little tiny glance up at the camera that he did where he was saying, "I'm so sorry to you." I would not buy that, especially considering where this is in the video as well. I've already edited this a lot, and it's still at a much later point in this video, so in the podcast time, no. I don't hold weight to that specific apology, just considering its context. Then, right after that, what also kind of hammers that home for me is what he does afterwards, is he tries to again do the thing that Alec did, where he pushes it off onto the person who was in the situation as well. And while, yes, Jeff was the person who kind of ridiculously decided to do said stunt, in general, to even be willing to do that, that was a dumb decision on Jeff's part as well. That does not mean that that excuses David's action in any level, because David still enabled that to happen. So at very least, he's enabling it. But not only that, he also did damage himself. So David's trying to share this responsibility that shouldn't be shared, and it's inappropriately shared, so it is blame shifting. And in this case, it's also victim blaming, which is also just don't do that, okay? Don't. Let's continue.
And I wish we did that better. And yeah.
That means you're open to learning and
no, I'm definitely open.
And I think you,
bro, I want to be able to be like, I want to be like 33 or 34 years old, and I want to be like the master of empathy.
I kid you not. This was like a few seconds later in the deal. I wanted to show how vastly different these two personas that he's put on have been presented, and how quickly it crashes from one to one. So he wraps up that one with a "so yeah," and he's very, very somber, or trying to portray as such, although we've already established some of the red flags that are in there. And then a few seconds later, he's happily and joyously talking about how he wants to be the most empathetic person ever, which I think is ironic in and of itself. But it's just interesting to note that psychology, how quickly that does shift. It makes you question what's being felt at those times, what's being genuinely processed at those times, and what's being genuinely portrayed. The smiles that we're seeing on their faces are genuine, except for hers. She's sitting there. She doesn't have the desire to laugh here. The two guys they seem to be cutting up a fair bit, which I don't feel is exactly the most appropriate for this specific time, but it's just a bit inappropriate and a silly sentiment to want to be the most empathetic person. But the weight behind it is important.
Oh my gosh.
I've said this before, like, I don't want to double down as like the villain. That's like, I never want to do that. I never want to do that. I have love for a lot of people, including Jeff. But I've lost love for a lot of people.
I have love for a lot of people. So, and during that time, he has some difficulty. He has a swallow, perhaps a burp in there. We know that that's an indicator of agitation for David. It shows up very quickly and frequently. Perhaps maybe he had something bad to eat that day, and that's making it maybe more inflamed. But along with that, we still have to pay attention to when that pops up, because even though your gut could be inflamed by something else, it just means that it's more sensitive, more active. So it's still a reliable tell. So he says that he does appreciate these people. He has that burp in there, which means that he's nervous or feeling some activity in his gut from that. He also has a shrug in there, which means that he might not love all of these people and he doesn't have a great relationship with anymore. And then he was also bringing in Jeff into that, which also then would mean that he doesn't have a great relationship with Jeff anymore if we're following his own verbal pattern. So now we're kind of seeing some of those things come to light. There's only a little bit left here, and then we'll get to kind of talk about everything at the very, very end.
But yeah, I want to learn, and I want to be able to be like 35 and be the person that like a young creator or like a young actor or whatever comes to for advice, because like this year has been the last 2 years have been the fucking worst times I could ever imagine. Yeah. But like, I don't know who does it. I think it's Kelly Clarkson, but like
even now in David's own phrasing here, he's shifted it back around to himself again about how he wants to be this person for everybody else because it's been so hard for him. And I can grasp why he's talking about how hard it's been for him because, yes, it could be hard for him. But once again, the situation demands that the response he gets for his actions is difficult. The consequences of negative actions is oftentimes hard to process, hard to go through because they're consequences. It's fascinating.
What doesn't kill you does make you stronger. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
And if I can get...
That guy doesn't believe that. Yeah, look away, bounce, and then rub his hand there. That's a pretty good indicator that he doesn't hold up to that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger thing, which is, I mean, it's an extremely cliche thing to say, and also there are so many instances of that just being a completely false claim. So that's probably where that's coming in here. But just non-verbally, in case you see that whole cluster that he did there, that's an indicator that probably doesn't agree on some level. Let's continue.
Through this, like properly through all this and properly learn stuff from it, then I'm going to be like a really fucking strong person. And I hope that I can utilize that strength, that I can help a lot of people through it.
You're starting today, right now. This last hour was probably the most growth that I think I've seen you have in a year. And, you know,
nice.
However it's received, maybe we won't have a podcast after this.
I want to make a note here of that. That kind of lets us know the perception of this as well. This guy saying, this is the most growth I've seen in the past year is in this one not super hot podcast. That's just hammering that home here. We're really getting to understand kind of the behind the scenes of this. Let's continue.
He saw this movie, The Greatest Showman, and he brought us all over and showed it to us. And it was a lot like you.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I really like that movie. I have a quote from it in my room now.
What happens in the movie that reminded you of yourself?
So The Greatest Showman is basically like this carny guy who like puts together a carnival, and it's like a wacky assortment of people, which is kind of like what we are.
Right. Old guy.
And yeah, he's everything. Old guy. He has like a hairy woman.
The bearded lady.
Yeah. No, it's like a lot of things. And his goal is always to be like to go one up from that. And that's like always been my thing. Is like I'm always like stuck in this YouTube world, and I'm like I want to do something else. Like I want to do something bigger. Like I want to make a film, not be an actor, but like that level of like, because YouTube, there's no respect there.
I'm just gonna make some pauses here because I left this in. This was so poetically perfect for me personally because of some of the past hobby studies that I've had in the back. I've always been interested with people and how their brains work even outside of strict academic settings. I appreciate it, understanding that. So another thing that I used to study was mentalism and fake psychics and what goes into things like cold readings and so on and so forth. So this person that he's referring to, if you haven't seen The Greatest Showman, it's about Mr. P.T. Barnum. You might recognize the phrase Barnum's statement. It's a statement that sounds specific but applies to most everybody. And so Mr. Barnum's phrase that he kind of lived by was that there is a fool born every minute, aka it's easy to take advantage of people by basic straightforward manipulation. And the story of The Greatest Showman, while it is a fantastic film, great music, excellent cinematics and scripting and acting, it is nowhere near historically accurate whatsoever. And the P.T. Barnum himself was a very slimy, greasy, self-centered, and manipulative person. And I find it ironic that David is finding himself as most reflected by an inaccurate version of a very slimy, greasy person. And in this, we're about to hear how David perceives himself in this situation, and it's all very self-motivated, again, very egotistical. So let's hear.
And I think that's really tough. Like I wish that changed because I think that fucks with a lot of creators. Yeah. Like in general, like I know it fucked with me because it's always like it was never enough. It's never enough. Like where you are, like you always have to do the next thing. And then in the movie he gets like lost in it. He gets what he wanted. Like he's rubbing shoulders with the stars. Yeah. He's like he has a completely new act, but he's not doing the things that got him there, and he's not doing the things that he loves. And that was like being with all those wacky people.
Yeah.
not saying there was ever a moment where like I was going to abandon anybody and being like, peace. Like,
Yeah.
Interesting. We're seeing some more things. Okay, so David wants to do different things because he wants to garnish respect from people. That's why his goal is he doesn't see YouTube as a respected position, and because people don't see it as a respected position, which is fair. There are a lot of people who like to throw shade at YouTubers because they don't grasp what goes into it. So there is that level of respect there, but that's not why a lot of YouTubers go into it. It's not to be respected. It's because of enjoying it, because it's a good monetary option, and because it may provide a work condition that you need. So that's why many people go into it. He's going into it because he wants some more respect, and he's going to try to move from it because he wants more respect. Along with that, he continues to say that this person, this fake P.T. Barnum in the movie that he relates to, gets everything that he wants and goes and does his own thing with the movie stars, which if we're going to follow David's logic, then that means that he wanted to do the same thing. And it kind of encourages us to believe that, because David himself is like, not to say that I wanted to leave or anything, please don't think that. Now that I'm thinking about what I've said, let's not consider the context of what I was saying there. I just was thinking that I got to do all these big things, and I forgot about the people that I was with. And so it's fascinating that it really gets to let us see what his psychology is, as opposed to what he tried to tie a bow with at the very, very end of the same statement. Let's continue watching. There's very little left of this.
hanging out with whatever. But just to wrap things up for this really bizarre podcast, I know things are going to be clipped from here and maybe taken out of context or taken with context, and people are reacting different ways. But I just want to be really clear that
okay, he's acknowledging some things. I feel like maybe he's acknowledging people like where I am, trying to see where his authenticity is and where it lies and why there's so much confusion and things like that. So he's trying to say, I know that people are going to try to take this and pick it apart and respond in various ways. So what he's doing is he's managing our perceptions here. I know that people are going to do ... so I want to get ahead of that by saying ... And so he's trying to manage perceptions because he's worried that he is still going to receive backlash. And yes, he is still going to receive backlash, and we're seeing why he is going to receive backlash. But it's that perception management side of things that lets us know that he knows he's perceived as being in the wrong. He's shown why we're perceiving him to be in the wrong, and that it really does seem to be still a valid feeling from the general population. And we also know that he doesn't want to really deal with that. So let's just watch this.
I mean, I've said it, but I just want to be really clear that that there are a lot of things that I could have done differently. There's, from before the accident to after the accident to nothing to do with the accident.
He's offering more excuses. He's trying to offer an excuse by sheer number of other things. So there were so many things that I have done wrong, so let's not focus as much on this one, is kind of what he's doing, which is a very common tactic. It's very easy to do. Oh, but there's all this other stuff, so this isn't as bad. It's not true. Don't try to devaluate or evaluate your own bad actions or anything like that based on the other ones around. That's what he's trying to do here. It doesn't work. It's not valid and it's not logical, but he is trying to still disperse our attention. Let's continue.
A lot of things that I could have done differently in my life, and and I'm sorry. And I promised this before, and I've said it in private, and I'll say it again, I'm making those changes, and I'm open to those changes, and I read every comment, unfortunately, that I see. So I do take.
Not really sure about this. So the issues that I'm having here again are eye contact. He's having a lot of difficulty again in this area with eye contact. In the same way that we saw earlier when he was doing the kind of half-assed not apology to Jeff in this very, very podcast. So he's doing that same patterning. Also, we're hearing the same vocal difficulty. This is a red flag all the way around, because along with that, he also consistently has micro head shakes no mixed in with larger head shakes no. The micro ones are the ones that I want to pay attention to because you're less likely to pay attention to teeny tiny movements like that. They happen more subconsciously, just happen. So if it's small like that, less likely to be controlled. So those are in there as well. It could be seen as a desynchronization. With everything in context there, I would be pushed towards that desynchronization of things, that he's not being fully sincere in this area, but it's definitely not enough to be concrete. But it is fascinating that does pop up here as well, especially with the rest of the context of everything else.
Everything into consideration, and I'm learning, and I'm not, and I don't do this for any other reason than to spread joy on people's faces and to like make people laugh. Like, genuinely don't do this for any other reason.
I'm sorry, it's still, frankly, a lie. For any creator to say this that has a monetized channel, it's a lie. That's not the only reason it's done. It's done as a job. And that's fine. It's a job. You're okay to say you do your job for the money. Who doesn't? The issue is that he's trying to really paint himself out to be this white knight. You know what? I'm just so perfect. I only make content that's monetized and makes a lot of money for you. No, David, it's a job. You can say it's a job. Don't try to lie to us and say that you're not in it for the money, because you are. You are. Every influencer who monetizes their channel realizes that this is for money as well. You can enjoy it for people. That's absolutely fine. In fact, I would encourage you to enjoy your content and also hope that the people that you make it for enjoy it as well. But it's a job. Don't lie.
And I want to keep doing that, and it's been difficult to do without sharing this side or part of me. I also want to be clear that I'm not, this video isn't a video where I'm pointing fingers at people or anything. This was just kind of just like how I would talk to a therapist, like kind of just like a way of like just getting stuff off my chest in a way that like I want to like grow from this, move on from this, be better from this, and be honest about this, just so I can move forward accordingly. Like, I feel like if I don't get this out or I don't get this off my chest, like I genuinely am like stunting my own growth, like in my character. Like, I feel like I'm just like in this box unless I'm really sharing my experiences and what I'm feeling. So that was the purpose of this, and no other purpose.
Because you said there's no other purpose, I paused it there. The purpose of this, he even wrapped it up himself, is more or less for his own benefit. So if any of you who have been affected by David or the actions that he's done, even if he may have apologized to you in this specific session, he said himself the only purpose of this was for him to feel better about what he's done so that he can move forward, so that he can move by the consequences that he's now facing, which is an indicator that he does not perceive or wish to take responsibility genuinely for the actions that he's done. If you would like me to perhaps take a look at Jeff's side of things, let me know. If it's not of interest, I understand, and I can go back into the regularly scheduled programming like I normally do, but it's definitely there. I would like to take a look at it as well if you are. Please feel free to bring any extra information to the table that might help add clarity in these situations. What I find myself able to do is just learn from a situation and try not to emulate it in areas of my own life. But without further ado, that's all that I've got today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.